Hello, change makers. Welcome back to Governance in Real Time, a daily micro training series that will lead up to our leadership briefing happening December 2nd. Govern Audaciously, how to protect, prepare, and position your nonprofit for 2026. If you were not here yesterday, we kicked off this series, and I'll give you a little quick recap of what we discussed. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Nkoyo F. Young Lewis. I consider myself a futurist, strategist, attorney, and the creator of the Impact Triad framework. And I help executive directors, board chairs, senior nonprofit leaders design audacious, future-proofed organizations that can withstand uncertainty. And uncertainty is the world that we live in right now. So every day for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to go live with a quick, powerful breakdown of one governance principle or some things you should be thinking about right now as a nonprofit, because 2026 is coming. And the organizations that will thrive will be the ones that prepare today. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. As I mentioned, in the last recording, I spend a lot of my time thinking about living in and around the nonprofit space. That is where I have spent most of my time either working or representing organizations. When I used to do that, I stepped out of traditional legal practice to actually help organizations bridge the gap between what the law and regulations require and sort of what our organizations and infrastructure often looks like. And so I'm very excited to partner with organizations, particularly movement organizations, advocacy-based organizations, justice-centered organizations, whether you're a C3, C4. We work with benefit corporations as well and other social enterprises to really make sure that we're helping you meet the moment and move your mission forward. It is my goal to ensure that more of our social profit organizations, and I love that. I heard someone name that back during the pandemic, that this isn't a nonprofit. That's such a misnomer. We are in the business of social profits. The things that nonprofit organizations do benefit society. We often fill in the gap between what our government can't do, or in this instance is choosing not to do, and our public sector sometimes creates the issue for, and also is not solving for. And so this space, this social sector, the nonprofit space, provides so much to society with between jobs, actually adding to the GDP, as well as meeting the needs of everyday individuals. And so it is my honor and privilege to work and walk alongside you to make sure that you are more able to do that every single day. And so one of the things that always sits with me that is super important to me is that we think beyond fundraising. And I know this is almost sacrilegious. This is absolutely insane that I'm having a conversation with you about something that's not fundraising as we get into giving season and probably the biggest time of the year for giving. But what I want to say is the money's out there. It doesn't always feel like it. Sometimes because we're not aligned. Sometimes because we're not organized. Sometimes because we're talking to the wrong people, or we haven't really figured out how to get all of our oars moving and paddling in the same direction at the same time. But there is money there. And a lot of organizations, their biggest risk actually isn't fundraising, which probably sounds absolutely insane that I'm saying that to you, right? Like, I have worked with organizations that have millions of dollars, who have a huge number of governance and compliance issues that expose them on the daily to regulatory risk and just chaos and confusion internally. I have worked with small organizations who have streamlined their processes and are now in a place where they can really go after bigger dollars and can diversify their funding. And so your size doesn't necessarily mean that you're better protected or not. How many years you've been in existence doesn't necessarily mean how better protected or organized you are. But what we do know, and there's a lot of data that supports this, is that often our boards are not as organized and helpful and useful as they need to, that our executive directors, CEOs are overtaxed, overburdened. They're making too many decisions. There's burnout. There's a lot of turnover in that space. And then, of course, we have staffs that are just not paid adequately for the tremendous amount of work that we're doing. And so there are a lot of areas, a lot of points of fragility in our organizations that we need to address. And I truly believe that most of this happens at the top with leadership. And leadership is twofold in the nonprofit space, right? We have the governance, the oversight of the organization. And yesterday we talked about what governance is and isn't. And specifically thinking about governance as the rules, the policies, the processes, procedures that you have in place that dictate how you operate. And some of those are defined by law, and a lot of them are and can be or should be defined by values and objectives. But without having a strong sort of operating system, we can get into areas where we have sort of blurred decision making. People are stepping on each other's toes. They're doing work that's not their work to do. And it just creates utter chaos. And so we can really help reduce that by having better systems in place so that our board can govern and provide strategic oversight and leadership, and our executive directors and senior leadership can manage the day-to-day, and we can all be marching forward towards the mission and being able to convey that to the public and to the funders who invest in that that change to reality. So today I want to talk with you about 5 warning signs that your nonprofit is not ready for 2026. And I want to say a few things first, right? I'm not a fear-based consultant. It's not my goal to make you feel very terrified, because I actually find that a lot of times people are fearful. They don't make great decisions. They don't make bold, courageous decisions. But in fact, my goal is to help you see where there might be cracks so that we can actually move to the place of actually creating solutions for them. And I want to encourage you in this moment to know that there are solutions to a lot of the common problems that nonprofit organizations face. And I specifically want to talk about this in this moment because we are in a world where there are a lot more pressures, right? 2026 will have increased scrutiny, as we have seen. We definitely have organizations that are already planning and preparing or needing to respond to government officials about whether they are truly C3s, whether they have to address their tax-exempt status. We're definitely seeing more funding volatility. We've got government contracts that have been rescinded, pulled away, different requirements or they can be eligible for them. We have funders who are being far more cautious and fearful in their giving, on top of the fact that, we've never really fully exercised or lived in a world of trust-based giving. And so a lot of times it comes with restrictions anyway. And then, of course, there are regulatory changes that are happening, even in terms of, what type of work can qualify as being lawful or not under this administration. And so there's a lot of reasons for us to really take better stock of what we are doing, what we are documenting, and who we are becoming in this season. And so I share these 5 signs not as an indictment, but rather as an indicator that there may be things that we need to optimize to protect our mission, to protect the people we serve, and to protect the people that we work alongside. So I am going to hop into it. That was a lot of getting ready there. But now we're going to jump into this. Some of you may have seen this if you're following me on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads is where I kind of play the most. You may have seen this post. I'm bringing it back up because, there's never enough eyes on it. And the repetition actually is a really good tool that's out there for everybody. So we're going to go through these 5 signs because specifically survival isn't a strategy. And I know that surviving and martyrdom is like a part of the DNA and identity of working in the nonprofit space. It doesn't have to be, but unfortunately that is sort of what we have accustomed ourselves to. But I want us to actually think about 5 signs that let us know we're not ready for what we're about to encounter, and how we can actually get ready. And again, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. But I encourage you to join me for lunch on December 2nd at 12 noon Eastern for our Govern Audaciously, because we're really going to get in there. I'm going to share some of the things that are concerns that are on the pipeline. I actually spend time. I have optimized all of the tech tools that I have at my disposal to give me updates around what are the regulatory changes that are happening on a weekly, monthly basis. So I have a pretty good lens into what's on the pipeline, what legislation is out there, what things are being fought, where it's still kind of gray. And so I encourage you to, if nothing else, come to just know what's out there so that you can make a reasoned decision about how you move forward. With that, let's just jump in. So, 5 signs you're not ready for 2026. This is my favorite. I often, sometimes in my work, get to sit in on board meetings, which is an interesting treat. All organizations do them very differently and sometimes very much the same around things happen. But the first sign you all are not ready, that we're not ready for 2026, is that we are slow to make decisions. Decisions drag on. We put here, every decision takes 3 meetings and a miracle in order for us to get to a resolution. So we're not able to pivot quickly. A lot of times your executive directors, CEOs express frustration at how long it takes for the board to opine or approve something that they need to be able to move forward. And so we really, as we head into 2026, need to get stronger in our decision making, and that often is helpful by clarifying what your framework is, so you know who decides what, when, and how, right? Is the full board have to meet for this? Can this be decided in a committee? Do we have committees that are actually optimal? Who's going to do the investigation? How are we going to make those decisions? Do we need to call a special meeting to handle things? And if so, what's the process for these things? All of these things should be aspects that you consider on the front end so that when uncertainty strikes, when the unexpected happens, we already have a playbook in place that helps us know and navigate that. The second sign that your org is not ready for 2026 is that you only see and talk about policies when there's a crisis, right? Something happens. Things have hit the fan, and that's when we're pulling out the bylaws and the policies and procedures to see what is going on or what we need to deal with. And so a lot of times we end up reviewing our governing documents through the lens of punishment rather than protection. And what we could really do is focus on these tools as things that actually do protect us and have a process by which we review our policies, our bylaws, etc., on a consistent basis, so that we're not trying to make decisions about what needs to happen next at the last minute. And this also is really helpful because if the policy is the policy, you don't want to be in the process that anytime something happens, now we're like, the policy's out of date, we need to update the policy. We want to have a process to do that. We want to make sure that everybody who's on the team knows the policies and can execute the policies, because they actually do form a level of protection for us from outsiders who might have questions and want to be looking at our books and seeing what we're doing, as well as internally to just make sure that there is a structured way that things happen. And I love to tell people policies do not have to be constraining. They do create a container, and we can design that effectively in a way that's values aligned. The third sign your organization is not ready for 2026 is that meetings feel like venting sessions. It's like we come and we share everything that's wrong. They're not necessarily generative. People leave without clear next steps, and no one is sort of assigned to something. There are no deadlines, timelines. It's just like we sat together and talked about all of the issues, but weren't able to move to a place of what are the opportunities. So yes, healthy culture matters. We need to have time and space to clear the air, but there need to be boundaries and expectations about meetings so that they don't get stuck in the drama without actually taking us to the next step. So one of the tips that you can have there is to recenter on strategy, create a framework for what does this look like? A lot of organizations use Robert's rules still. And so there is a framework there around how, issues are presented, how there's opportunity for discussion, there's motion to, table that, move it to a vote, do whatever. And so going back to having sort of structured processes around conversations, especially if they are going to be complex, emotionally charged, It's just really helpful to create boundaries and set expectations for everyone, and even execute the use of a timer around how long you will deliberate about those things, so that you can at least move to a next step and not allow those things to continue to linger without any sort of resolution. And I like to name this because, in my former work, I also represented a lot of families who were in special education, the special education process at schools. And so a lot of times you end up having to sit with conflict. Things don't get perfectly resolved, and you have to have a plan and an approach to deal with that, because there will be conflict, there will be complexity, there will be uncertainty in the work that you do as a justice-centered, mission-aligned movement org, advocacy org. People who, in my opinion, are fighting the status quo. You all are disruptors. You're already doing an almost impossible task of changing whole systems in the work that you're doing. And so there will be challenge and complexity and conflict. And equally as important as having a way to deal with those things is also having a process to sit with conflict that might persist in your organization. And I'm looking over here, I have a bookshelf full of things, and I always get the title of this book wrong. And of course I can't, there it is, Staying with Conflict. And that's a piece of the work and the tension. And so having a plan around that is really important as well. The fourth sign that you're not ready for 2026, and this one is kind of an ouch, because I know a lot of organizations that are facing this right now, or getting ready to, or maybe don't even know that key leaders are planning to step away. But leadership turnover never stops, and we don't really have a plan for what that looks like. So that might mean that our executives and chairs burn out every few years. And that's not necessarily that you have a people problem. That is, in my opinion, a structure problem that can be fixed with intention and design. A lot of that also leans into some succession planning and building your bench for both your board as well as for successors to your executive director and senior leaders in advance, so that we are already preparing people to step into roles of leadership rather than trying to find people at the last minute to move things forward. One of the key tricks for this is to align your culture, capacity, and compliance so that your leaders can catch a breath. I mentioned earlier, I am the creator of the Impact Triad, and I truly believe that when we make sure that culture, capacity, and compliance are moving in tandem, that we have an operating system to make massive, deep impact sustainably without burning out our leaders. And so when we think about, who we are, how we do the things, who is at the table, what resources we have available, and how we create a process of compliance, which allows us to be accountable, which allows us to really think about where things should lie, we can do a lot more work in a way that is less strenuous than the way that we do it currently. And last but not least, in this sort of marathon of signs that your organization might not be ready for 2026, is the fact that you're doing more, but you're seeing less impact. And I like to say this, and I'm going to tread lightly because I know a lot of people are doing a lot. And in our organizations, especially when you're underfunded, under-resourced, we have to rely on volunteers and the goodwill of people. And we know that volunteerism is on the decline. And so there are fewer hands to make the work light. You can find yourself trying to do all the things. And oftentimes it's a handful of people trying to do an incredible amount of things. And people are busy. But as I always, when I consult with for-profits, I work with lawyers a lot, and a lot of other regulated leaders. I always like to mention busy doesn't actually mean productive. It doesn't actually mean focused. It really just means busy. And so one of the things that we can do is make sure that we are operating with clarity first, so that we are not amplifying confusion and chaos within the org. One of the things I love about the work that I do, and I have a great opportunity to do and work with a lot of different sectors, is I help people also figure out how they leverage technology and how they use technology in a way that's both ethical, but also allows them to buy back time, create better structure, for their organization. And a lot of times people are like, I'll just get a tech tool and it's going to make everything work. And the reality is, like, your technology can only amplify your processes. So if your processes are chaotic, it will amplify the chaos. If you have sort of thought through your processes and sort of laid them out in a way, we can align technology with it and open up the world of automation to help technology sort of streamline and move things faster. And I think that's the same case with AI. I know a lot of people are jumping into, should I use it? Should I not use it? If I am, like, I just sort of do it haphazardly without sort of a governance process or a way to think about when it makes sense. Another piece of work that I help organizations do. But we really don't want to just start adding a whole bunch of things without that governance piece, right? Without the rules, the values, the processes, the policies in place to make sure that we're amplifying to the proper end, or to at least the direction that we think is going to get us closer to where we want to go. And so if you're finding yourself doing all the things, but not really seeing the results of that, I would encourage you to take a step back, to think about the bigger picture, to create a to-don't list and like mark out all the things that we are not going to do, and to actually create a governance rhythm and to start to have a place and time for you to review, reflect, and refine how the organization runs so that we can do this better. And that's work. You know, many of you are probably working on your budgets right now. Some of you might be in strategic planning mode, or at least reviewing where you're at in your strategic plan. Hopefully it's not just a really gorgeous document that you spent days, weeks, months on, maybe paid thousands of dollars to have, and just is in a drawer somewhere. Hopefully it is a living, breathing document that allows you to make better decisions about what things you will or won't do as an organization and where you're going to invest. But you have to have time to sit with those things, to think about those things so you can be prepared. And I know there's a lot of year-end things that happen, including a huge fundraising push to make sure that we capture all the dollars before the end of the year. But I encourage you as a team and as a board to block time to actually sit and think about how we are governing and where there are gaps and where there are places and opportunities for us to be more mindful, more intentional about how our organization runs. And again, you know, I absolutely want to invite you to join me on, sorry, I'm trying to change my screen. I definitely want to invite you to join me on December 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern. It's virtual. It's actually happening on Crowdcast, which is a pretty cool platform. Yes, there is a replay. I've been getting that question a lot, but I think you'll get the most out of joining live. But it is an actual opportunity to spend 1 hour actually thinking about what's going on around you and what things you want to consider and put into play, and have conversations with your board. Board chairs are provided, board members, senior leaders, executive directors, funders, other consultants. Like, I encourage you to be in this space so that we can all be moving forward with the most amount of knowledge and information, and to help guide how we move and work together in 2026 and beyond. So again, if today's conversation made you think, pause, or realize you've got some governance work to do, join me in the virtual room on December 2nd. Everyone is welcome. This is a free, high-impact leadership briefing for executive directors, board chairs, senior leaders who want to protect their organization, prepare for 2026, and position themselves for sustainable impact without sacrificing culture, capacity, or compliance. I love to say I don't do fluff. This is about strategy. This is about clarity. I believe it will be the strongest hour of preparation you can invest in for free as you're going into your leadership for the new year. So if that is appealing to you, I encourage you to click the link. It should be in the caption. You can see it here. go.leadaudaciously.com/govern25 since it's happening in 2025, but we will be preparing for 2026. I hope to see you in the room, and thank you for joining this briefing. Of course, if you are watching the replay, and even if you watched live, absolutely leave comments. Your feedback is helpful about what we want to talk about. And I will be in here. I do check the comments and will respond, and it will also help, shape how we discuss further issues related to governance. All right. Well, that's all I've got. I hope that you have a great evening and that you remember to go lead audaciously.